So I had night operations. So how the eye works, so first we have the cornea, so that is like the basic first layer of your eye, so if anything, you touch your eye or anything like that, you're good.
I guess so. What do you want to see? You want to see the PowerPoint or?
Yeah, you just put the PowerPoint.
Okay.
So you have your cornea, that's like if anything touches your eye, you touch your eye, that would be the first layer of the cornea, and that'll refract the light, so it'll make it smaller, kind of in that picture over there. And then after it goes through the cornea, it will go through the pupil, and that is on the inner part of your eye, like you have the color and then you have the pupil on the inside. And that's what will dilate and contract based on how much light is in there. And then after the pupil, it will go through your lens and that will refract the light again. And then through there, it will go through the retina, which we can see in this picture over here. And so in the retina, that's where the rods and cones are. And so at night, use your rods to see, and during the day, use your cones. And retina is the molecule in your retina that will actually absorb the light, and that will send signals to your brain on how much to like expand or dilate your pupils by based on how much light. So if it's nighttime, your eyes will, your pupils will expand to grow bigger to absorb more light. And then during the day, you know, it will retract and get smaller so you absorb less light because you don't need as much light during the day because there's a lot of light around. And we can see this example over here. And then one is refracted, and it gets refracted twice. So by the time the image actually gets to your like retina and stuff, it's actually flipped upside down, but our brain knows to flip it back the other way. Because it's refracted twice, it gets flipped upside down. Yep, and then all the light signals going through electronic signals, and our brain will interpret these electric signals into what we understand as like images, is how we see and stuff. So factors related to night vision, so from dark to light, that will produce a glare. So, you know, if you're in the room and stuff, then you wake up and you first turn on the light, it'll, you know, you'll kind of like blind you for a second, produce a glare, and the rods and cones will be strongly stimulated. And this is because and then the pupils will also like constrict and get smaller because your eyes after sleeping, they got like adjusted to the darkness. So they'll get all that light and they'll be bigger because they're absorbing more light in the dark. And then when you turn the light on, they'll shrink and you'll kind of like feel that pain. It's because you're absorbing all that light and you're sending signals to your brain that you don't need as much of your pupil to absorb that light. And then from light to dark, so that would be complete darkness for the first couple of minutes. Yeah, so if you're going from like a really light room like this and all the power just cut out for some reason, the sun went down and just went dark. Yeah, you'd see complete darkness, and it takes your eyes about 30 minutes to adapt. And that's because the rod pigments in your eyes need to adapt to the change itself, and your pupils will dilate, so they'll expand to absorb more light at night, and that takes about 30 minutes for that to fully process and happen. And due to low light, you'll still have like blind spots in your eye. So during the day, I could look at that pole or something, but at night, you know, if I can't see as well, that pole might not be there. And then if you stare at an image too long, it can appear to disappear or move, and that would be a difference, you know. Just a picture example kind of the difference between light and darks, you know, as we all know. And some night optical illusions. This is supposed to be a flickering light at the top. I guess it didn't go through for whatever reason. But first we have a false horizon, so that would be at night you can't really see anything, and you think maybe the horizon, you're like in a bank or something, you think you're lined up with the horizon, but you're actually not, but you can't tell just because you can't see, and maybe you're in like IMC or something like that. Just relying on your senses. And autokinesis, that would be if you're staring at something and it starts to appear as if it's moving. And then, so we have the black hole approach, so that's kind of when you're around like featureless terrain and stuff, and you're flying an approach, and because you can't see anything, you look at the runway lights, and you'll be flying higher, so you'll fly over the runway and stuff higher than, you'll think you'll be normal and stuff, but you'll be flying over the runway higher than you actually think you are. This could be bad because, you know, you could overshoot the runway, run off the end, and like crash or something. And then featureless terrain, that's that exact opposite as we have in this picture over here. At night when there's no terrain or lights around, it can be hard to gauge if you're on a normal glide path or not. And so as we can see, even on the low glide path, it still looks like you're on a normal glide path in this picture over here, which even though this guy's not on the right, he's on a low glide path. And you know, that could be a hazard because you hit trees, stuff like that, but you just can't see because there's no references nearby for you to help judge that. And then so for disorientation, to help prevent disorientation, you want to try to keep your head movement to a minimal. You know, you're fine. You don't want to be like looking down at the ground and stuff, rolling around in the cockpit, doing whatever. You kind of just want to keep your eyes outside, mostly using your instruments to verify your position and where you're at and stuff. And you definitely want to rely on your instruments more at night because it is, you know, a lot harder to see. So you don't want to be using outside references because it can lead to those illusions on the last slide. And you know, if you have autopilot and you're flying across country or something, you know, use the autopilot. Why make it harder on yourself? You want to reduce the workload as much as you can. And you know, glide slope. If you're flying in, landing, it's really nice to have a, you know, you can even teach your private kids. Commercials should definitely know it because it should be instrument rated by then. But if not, you teach them use a glide slope. And then the G1000, we have like the visual glide slope. I forgot to plug it in. It's like this GPS one. You know what I'm talking about? You can plug in like a visual glide slope to any, even if it's not an approach.
Like
You know
a
what I'm
visual
talking about?
approach?
Yes, a visual approach. Yeah, you can plug that in. Have that too, just for so you know to follow that. That way you're guaranteed, you know, obstacle clearance stuff, and you can guarantee that you're on a normal glide path while using your instruments, using the maybe an actual glide slope if ILS is there, or the visual one that the G1000 has. And yep. So next we have proper adjustment of interior lighting. So because it takes about 30 minutes for eyes to adjust to darkness, you want to reduce the lights in the cockpit as much as possible. You know, you don't want to be on your like phone full brightness and everything, using like the brightest lights, turning all the settings up, because that'll significantly reduce your night vision. And because it does take about 30 minutes for your eyes to adjust to the darkness, you know, if you use super bright light, then it could take 30 minutes and you could get disoriented more easily and it'd be harder for you to see and stuff. Yes, you want to avoid bright lights or flash, and it is really beneficial if you do have red lights in the cockpit to use those, because something about like a deep color red, I have this on a later slide too, I'm pretty sure, deep color red, it won't trigger like the retina in your eyes to like respond to light, I guess. Kind of some like, I don't know exactly how to explain it, but the red, deep red will not trigger your eyes to reset that 30-minute dark adaptation. Yep, so importance of having a red flashlight in your plane. So deep red light does not trigger the retina. That's that protein that absorbs light in your retina that I was just talking about. And this will allow your night vision to continue instead of resetting and having to wait for that 30-minute adjustment period because you have red light. As soon as you turn it off, it won't take 30 minutes for it to readjust. And if you don't have a green light, or a red light, I mean, green can also be acceptable. And you know, you can use a white flashlight for pre-flight, just don't like, you know, shine it near your eyes or anything like that. And you know, if you don't have a red or green flashlight available, you want to dim your cockpit on the insides as much as possible. Keep the lights down low, that way you're not resetting your night vision. So for the night pre-flight inspection, you want to do it exactly how you would in the day. Good, thorough, follow the checklist. And use a flashlight to check fuel and oil. You know, don't use anything flammable. Don't check the fuel with like a lighter or something like that. And you know, make sure you have all your equipment for VFR day and night, which is 91205, 8 tomato flames and flaps, which is fuses, circuit breaker, landing light, anti-collision light, position light, and source of power, which we found 91205. And we have circuit breakers, so we don't need the fuses in our plans. So engine starting procedure, so you want to go ahead and turn your position light and landing light on before you start the engine, your anti-collision lights, and you know, obviously make sure nobody's around the plane. Yoke clear, maybe give it a couple seconds. Just really make sure you look outside, make sure nobody's walking around because it will be darker conditions, so you don't want to start the prop and some dude's like tying a shoe in front of it. And then so taxiing and orientation at an airport, so you want to reduce your taxi speed more than normal just because it's darker. You just slow down, be more situationally aware. Use your landing light and taxi light to help you see. You know, unless somebody's like taxiing near towards you, then you want to go ahead and turn your strobes and landing light off. That way you're not blinding them. Maybe switch from strobes to fin strobes. Turn that landing light off if someone's coming at you. That way you're not blinding them. And then know the airport diagram beforehand. So if you're flying to an airport at night, you know, study the airport diagram, know where you're gonna taxi to and stuff. That way you're not trying to like figure it out on the go at night when you're already in reduced visibility conditions. And taxi brief, that goes with the knowing the taxi beforehand. So So you arrive at the airport, or maybe you're taxiing at the airport you're at, you know, kind of brief your taxi route, which way you're gonna go and stuff, or whatever ATC tells you. And you wanna verify all your taxi markings outside, you know, with whatever you're using to taxi, so it could be charts, Forthlight on your iPad, your G1000, whatever resources you have to help you understand we got a situation where you want to verify that you're going on those taxiways outside and not just fully relying on the inside. Because sometimes they might not be updated or whatever, and you could, you know, Forthlight might say you're on Taxi F if it hasn't been updated in like a year or something. They could have changed it to Taxi Hotel, and that could be a deviation, so you want to avoid that. And then for pilot-controlled lighting, so if you're taxiing at night at an uncontrolled field, like Eastman, prime example, 3 clicks will be the dimmest lights, 5 clicks will be medium intensity, and 7 clicks will be highest intensity, and that's how you do the pilot-controlled lighting, and you just do it on the CTAF frequency, which, you know, we all know for Eastman, 12455. So for takeoff, you know, on your run-up, you want to really ensure that your parking brake is set and that your aircraft is fully stopped. You don't want to be moving at night because it'd be even harder to tell as opposed to the day. And, you know, do the run-up the same during the day, you know. Make sure, though, you want to do the alternator test because, you know, the G1000, everything is pretty much electricity driven. So you want to, if your alternator is going to fail, you want it to be on the run-up instead of while you're in cruise. And, you know, you want to ensure your heading is aligned with the runway, which that isn't the commercial ACS for taking off anyway. But especially at night, too, you just want to make sure you're doing this that way. Yeah, because it's harder to see at night and everything. You're making sure you're taking off on the right runway. And then use centerline lighting to stay aligned with the runway, using your rudder pedals. And it's nice to have kind of like a halfway point or a point where you're, you know, if you're like, okay, I'm not rotating beyond this point, you want to go ahead and just cut your engine, just predetermine that point just for safety and everything like that. Before you take off, and while you're taking off in rotation, you know, you want to check your instruments frequently, make sure, you know, you have the power and everything, all your instruments are in the green, you know, your airspeed's coming alive when you're going. And that's why it's good to have that predetermined point of where you're going to stop and apply braking and not try to rotate. So if your airspeed's not coming alive or something like that, you know, it could be a hazard in flight. So it's better to just be safe on the ground and be up in the air and have your instruments malfunctioning. So climb out, so reaching the rotation speed, which us at 64. So after you reach rotation speed, you want to refer to outside references and flight instruments at the same time. So for us, 76 knots until you reach 1,000 AGL. You get injured? Okay. And then, you know, after that, after you reach 1,000 AGL, you might want to pitch for 87. But you don't want to make any turns until you're reaching a safe maneuvering altitude or safe altitude that you're at. So if it's at a familiar airport, you know, like at Eastman, at 1,000 AGL, you can go ahead and make your turnout and stuff like that. But if you're at an unfamiliar airport, it's not going to hurt you to go up to 1,500 AGL before you start turning and stuff like that. Or pitch for 87 before you really start climbing. So for in-flight orientation, so we'll never really get tested on our night flying abilities, so there's no point in making it hard on yourself and trying to like navigate using like roads and cities and, you know, dead reckoning and stuff like that. So you just want to make it easy. Use GPS if you have it, and then if you don't have GPS, use a VOR. And if you don't have either of those, you know, highways are pretty easy to follow. They're well lit up. You can use highways to navigate to where you're going. And then dead reckoning if you have to. Trying to make sure your times and stuff are right on the highway. Cities and lights, you know, on the sectional, they'll be big, lit up in yellow, so should be pretty easy to find. And you got to have enough fuel for VFR day plus 45 minutes, so that's just to get to your destination plus 45 minutes. I think I put that wrong. I think that's supposed to say get to your destination plus 45 minutes on the VFR day. And then if you accidentally enter IMC, you can prevent this, you know, if you get a good weather briefing, stuff like that beforehand. Make sure you're not flying, you know, like a private pilot kid, like stage 2 or something into very questionable weather. So you can kind of tell if you're an IMC at night though. The first indication would be the disappearance of the ground. And if this does happen, you want to go ahead, trust your instruments, you know, even if your body's saying you're banking or something, trust your instruments and just go off whatever they're saying. And if you do enter IMC, the best thing to do is turn around, because if you were VFR right before that, it's going to be VFR if you turn around. So that would be your best course of action if you do accidentally enter IMC. So verifying the airplane's attitude to reference with instruments. So the importance and low visibility, it is very easy to get disoriented. And if you rely on your bodily senses too much and don't trust the instruments, you can experience vertigo, which that would be like if a light's flickering in your plane or something, you start getting disoriented, kind of feel like you're seasick and you're like whooshy and stuff. So if you're feeling whooshy, you know, you might think like a spin is like normal, and that can lead to a graveyard spiral, which is when it's like you're like banked and you're descending, but you think you're in straight level flight, and you end up just putting yourself into a spin. And black hole approach, that's what I was talking about earlier, when you have no terrain around your runway, so you'll end up flying higher than you think you are, because all you see is the runway lighting, and you could just, overshoot the runway. And crash and autokinesis, I'd just be staring at the point, and it feels like it's starting to move. So if you're aiming at something outside and it's starting to move, that's not good. So for night emergency procedures, so for electrical failure, this is why it's so important to do the alternate test during run-up, because if your alternator is going to fail, you want it to happen on run-up. You don't want it to happen while you are flying. But if this somehow, you do this, your alternator works and everything, and then you get up in there, and then it does somehow fail, you want to go ahead and turn off everything you don't need, so all your non-essentials, maybe cut the landing light, maybe keep your fin strobes on, dim everything, just turn off everything you don't need, basically. And land as soon as practicable, so, if there's an airport that's like 10 miles away that you're safe at, you could leave your airplane at, you could land there. And then inform ATC and ask vectors to the nearest airport if you don't know where the nearest airport is, or anything like that. And for an engine failure, this is why it's very important to a mag check before your run up, which we all know how to do, but for a private pilot, you tell them, do your mag check within no more than 170 and within 50 of each other, and then if a failed mag does happen, you can tell because you'll drop one mag and the engine will just like go to almost completely quitting. So it should be pretty easy to suspect. But if this does happen, you do experience an engine failure in flight at night, you want to remain calm. And before, anytime I do any cross countries at night, I'll probably get my students to do this too. You want to get a rough idea of your glider range, which you can find in the POH. And so if you're cruising at 7,500 feet, it'll give you a rough idea of how many miles you can glide. And if you have an airport, say your glider range is 10 miles and you have an airport within 6, then you can know you can safely make that roughly. Be safe to assume that. That's why it's good to calculate that, especially at night when, around here it's just like farms and stuff like that. And you could think you're landing into a field, but you really land into a bunch of trees or something like that, just because you can't really see around here. And the nearest page, so if your engine does fail, obviously keep your nearest page up and see if there's any airports you can glide to. And you have roughly about 30 minutes of electricity before anything goes wrong. We have our battery that lasts for 30 minutes without the alternator, and our E-battery, which also lasts for 30 minutes without the alternator, and then our standby, which is an additional 30 minutes, so like an hour 30 in total. But before any real problems start occurring, you have 30 minutes. And for a forced landing, you could go on 121.5, or if you're already talking ATC, let them know. Squawk 7700. And you want to fly the plane, you want to land close to public access. Don't land in congested areas. So if you do lose an engine, you obviously don't want to land in Dublin or something like that. Not the runway like the city. And as a last resort, if you literally have like nothing around you, you're kind of near a highway, you could try to land with the traffic on a highway. All right, so for traffic patterns, so sometimes the airports, they can already be hard to find, especially near cities at night, and a good way to be able to find one is the rotating beacon, because like an airport at night will just look like everything else in the city, all lit up, stuff like that, same lights. And for uncontrolled, you can use the pilot controlled lighting, change it, change the settings on it maybe, try to see if it lights up more than the city lights around it if you can't find it. And then listen to ATIS, that way you know which way to join the runways and stuff based on the wind. And then for controlled, you want to get the ATIS, they'll tell you which runways in use, and just follow the instructions that they give you. And then use your heading to verify the correct runway, so if they're, left down runway 2, make sure you're lined up for the left down runway 2, whatever ATC tells you. And at night, there is a tendency to fly a wider pattern, so just being aware of that can help you. not fly as wide a pattern, just being aware of it. And, you know, your judgment may be impaired just because it is nighttime, you can't see as much. And then so approaches and landing without landing lights. So at night on the runway, you won't be able to see the tire marks, you really won't be able to see much of the runway, just the lighting. And the runway will not appear until the last second because of the reduced visibility. And especially if your vision is not fully adapted, you know, it may even appear later. So the best way to land at night, you want to leave a bit of power, come in faster, and you just want to have like a very slow sink. You don't want to come in like a normal landing and flare at the last second. You want to just come down very gradually, very gradually, very gradually, and, you know, kind of like really work into the flare, not just come down and flare like we normally do. And that will prevent you and your student from slamming at 10 feet. You know, if you came in like a normal flare and you don't see the runway, they can go, oh crap, and boom, just bounce, which could damage the struts and stuff like that, so you don't want that. And then, yeah, landing lights, they're only required on aircraft for compensation or higher, so ours definitely have to have it because all of ours are compensation or higher. And then if you're ever, you know, you're coming to land for any reason, you feel unsafe, uncomfortable, for any reason you don't like what you see, you know, just go around. That's why at night they have you have 45 minutes of reserve. That way you shouldn't have to worry about gas or anything. You can go around multiple times if you need to, maybe even fly to another local airport if you feel unsafe for any reason. And don't second guess, you know, if you're ever coming to land and you're like, I don't know, this doesn't seem like a good idea, just go around. That's why you have the 45 minutes. And then, yeah, if you're at an unfamiliar airport that's uncontrolled, you can, the first time come down, you know, overfly the runway. Maybe if the lights aren't like working super well or only half of them or something like that, you can fly over the runway to kind of see what it's like, get a gist of the conditions, and then go back up, join the pattern, and come back to land after that. You know, especially at like new airports or something like that. And then this one guy, Captain Gilmore, Lampew, said aviation itself is not inherently dangerous, but to an even greater degree in the sea, it is terribly unforgiving of any carelessness or impact or neglect. So if you're coming into land, you don't feel safe for any reason, you're like, oh, you know, I'm just going to decide to try to land anyway, and your student, you know, lands on the lights to the left of the centerway light here for some reason. They run down and smack a runway sign, you know, that could be the end of the plane in both y'all. You could end up in the hospital. So that's why it's better to be safe. If you don't feel safe for any reason, just go around. And that was all. How many minutes was that?
22, 23.